Rafe, how did this silence start? How did we come to associate a 2-minute silence with the act of remembering and remembrance itself?
Well, the 2-minute silence actually predates the ceremony that we're going to see shortly, predates the Cenotaph even. It actually goes back to South Africa in 1918 in Cape Town, where it was first marked. And the idea of the 2-minute silence was that the first minute you would remember those who have returned home, and the second minute would be to remember those who didn't return, the fallen. But it wasn't until an Australian living in London wrote to the press here and broached the idea of remembrance that it took over in this country. And the king was gung-ho behind it, King George V, who said that the entire nation should have no work, no sound, no locomotion, so that all minds can be concentrated on reverent remembrance of our glorious dead. And the first silence was held at Buckingham Palace, which is where the very first Armistice Day ceremony took place in 1919. And the structure we're going to see today of the 2-minute silence, I think it's important to note. We have the famous last post normally sounded. We may not hear it today, but always normally you have the last post to start off with. That used to be sounded in order to mark the sense that it was the end of the day, the garrison was secure, but it was also a bugle call to the wounded in the battlefield or those who were lost to help them find their way home. And so symbolically, it's a way to summon the spirits of the dead to the cenotaph, to the empty tomb. You then get that 2-minute silence where we revere our fallen, after which you have the rouse, which is essentially in the morning the bugle call to get soldiers out of the bed. You have the réveillé to wake them up, and then the rouse to get them out of bed. And that again symbolizes the Christian idea of Judgment Day, when the living and the dead will rise up together in harmony and descend. And the structure of that also replicates the night vigil, the 2-minute silence. In the old days, there would be a vigil over the dead in case they were just in a coma, or if they were unconscious, they might actually not be dead. So that night vigil, we are symbolically replicating through this 2-minute silence, and it's our way of saying we are guarding, we are honoring, and we are protecting the dead.
I suppose that royal instigation of this ceremony, of this silence, I suppose that's why this is a Commonwealth-wide event. That the origin, as you mentioned, in South Africa, but of course in Australia, in Canada, in many other parts of the Commonwealth, this is a very important day as well.
That's right, it's a terrifically important day. It was after the Second World War that the name changed from Armistice Day to Remembrance Day, because of course we were remembering many more than just those who fell in the Great War. Now uniquely, Britain marks 2 different dates. We have Armistice Day, Remembrance Day today, but then we also have Remembrance Sunday. In Canada, Australia and elsewhere, everything is held on the 11th of the 11th. But we changed things because in the Second World War, every hour and every minute was so important to the war effort that we couldn't risk wasting a day, or spending a day not in the factories, not building munitions. And so the decision was made to have it on a Sunday, and that's why we have this unique tradition of actually marking remembrance on 2 different days. But you're quite right, it's still a vitally important day, and of course also in France it's a national holiday. In America it's known as Veterans Day too. And the King was also spearheading the idea of the cenotaph very much as well, along with David Lloyd George, and it was on this day in 1920 that the cenotaph was unveiled, at the same time that the tomb of the unknown warrior was also created. And in fact the unknown soldier from France was put into a gun carriage with a coffin draped in the Union flag, and that was led to the cenotaph, where the King pressed a button and the Union flags draping the cenotaph fell to the ground, and he then processed with the gun carriage to Westminster Abbey for the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. So it's on this day that those 2 most significant and most sacred of our remembrance icons were created.
And there we have it as the crowds in Whitehall erupt into spontaneous applause there. We've also seen ceremonies around the country take place, and I'm still with Esther, Phil and Rafe. And Rafe, as we were saying, this isn't just something that happens in London. This is happening right across the country, some ceremonies big, some small, all quiet, all solemn.
Absolutely. The 11th hour now, and also tomorrow, we remember the sacrifice, we remember the blood, sweat and tears that were spilled to secure our liberties. And, you know, we remember the lost dreams of those young soldiers who gave their today for our tomorrow. And the liberties we all enjoy were secured at a very high price. And I think it's the least we can do to spend 2 minutes to reflect on all of that.